You wake up with nothing on your calendar. No alarm. No inbox. No boss waiting for proof that you are useful. The first thing that reaches you is light, then warmth, then the soft sound of other bodies moving nearby, because for most of human history your day did not begin with a command from a machine. It began with the world. So what did you do all day? For roughly 300,000 years, your species lived without offices, schools, supermarkets, rent, clocks, weekends, or retirement plans. Agriculture, the habit of planting fields and living from stored crops, only became common in the last 10,000 to 12,000 years. That means the life your body was shaped for was not a life of schedules. It was a life of attention. This does not mean it was easy. It does not mean it was peaceful. And it definitely does not mean your ancestors floated around the savannah having deep thoughts and eating berries whenever they felt like it. But it does mean something strange. The normal human day may have been less packed than yours. The best clue comes from foragers, which means people who get food from wild plants, wild animals, fishing, gathering, digging, tracking, and sharing instead of farming fields or buying groceries. Living foragers are not fossils. They are modern people with modern histories. But anthropologists study them carefully because their lives can show what is possible when humans do not live inside farms, factories, and clocks. In the 1960s, anthropologist Richard Lee studied the Jew/hoansi, often called the Kung San, in the Kalahari. Lee counted how much time adults spent directly getting food. His famous estimate suggested that many adults spent about 15 to 20 hours a week on subsistence, which simply means the work needed to feed yourself and your group. That number shocked people. It was not the whole day. It did not include every task, every walk, every child watched, every fire fed, or every tool repaired. But it broke a modern assumption. Hunting and gathering was not automatically an endless starvation job. So where did the rest of the day go? First, your day went into food. Not food in the modern sense. No fridge. No delivery app. Food began as a question written across the ground. Which plants are ripe? Which tracks are fresh? Which fruit is worth the walk? Which animal passed here before dawn, and did it look healthy, young, wounded, dangerous, or already too far away? If you were gathering, you might walk with other women, children, and older relatives toward a patch of edible plants that your group already knew well. You would not wander randomly through nature like a lost tourist. You would move through a mental map built from memory, seasons, smells, stories, and the experience of people who had walked that land before you. A plant was not just a plant. It was a calendar. It was a warning. It was a meal that might only exist for a few days. If you were hunting, your work might be slower than a movie chase. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe, who studied the Hadza of Tanzania, described a world where skill mattered as much as strength. A hunter needed to know animals, wind, silence, patience, and luck. Sometimes the hunt succeeded. Sometimes it failed. Sometimes the smartest thing to do was stop before wasting more energy. That is one of the first counterintuitive truths. Your ancestors were not trying to maximize effort. They were trying to maximize return. In plain language, they wanted the most food for the least danger and wasted energy. A modern office rewards looking busy. A foraging day punished pointless effort. Walk too far in the heat for nothing, and your body paid the price. Chase the wrong animal, and your group got nothing. So the day involved work, but not constant work. It involved waiting. Waiting for heat to pass. Waiting for someone to finish scraping a hide. Waiting for children to stop crying. Waiting for a hunter to return with nothing, or something, or a story that told everyone where not to go tomorrow. A lot of the day was maintenance. That word sounds boring now. But in deep history, maintenance was survival. You repaired a carrying bag. You sharpened a stone edge. You twisted fibers into cord, which is just plant material turned into string. You cleaned a digging stick. You patched a shelter. You checked a wound. You watched smoke because fire was not a decoration. Fire was heat, safety, cooking, light, and a social center. Richard Wrangham, the primatologist who wrote about the importance of cooking, argued that fire changed human life because cooked food gives the body more usable energy. A cooked meal is not just warmer. It is easier to chew, easier to digest, and often safer. So someone had to keep the fire alive. Someone had to carry embers. Someone had to know which would smoke too much. Then there were children. Not one child alone in one room with one exhausted parent. Children everywhere. A baby on a hip. A toddler in the dirt. An older child carrying a smaller one. A grandmother watching, correcting, feeding, teasing, and remembering. Anthropologist Kristen Hawkes studied Hadza women and helped develop what became known as the grandmother hypothesis. That idea says human grandmothers may have mattered deeply in evolution because older women helped feed and care for children after they stopped having babies themselves. In plain English, a child was not raised by one isolated adult. A child was raised by a network. That changes the whole shape of the day. Your ancestors did not need a calendar event called parenting. Parenting was mixed into gathering, cooking, resting, playing, warning, teaching, and laughing. A child learned by watching hands. A child learned which berries not to eat because someone slapped the hand away. A child learned tools by touching bad tools, breaking small things, and being corrected before the mistake became deadly. This is why a prehistoric day was full even when it was not scheduled. Knowledge had to move from body to body. How do you track an animal? How do you read a sky? How do you tell a harmless snake from a serious problem? How do you remember a waterhole from a story told by an elder when you were small? There was no school building. But there was education everywhere. This matters because modern people often imagine ancient life as pure emergency. Run from predator. Kill mammoth. Hide in cave. Repeat. That version is simple. It is dramatic. It is also incomplete. Most days were probably not a monster attack. Most days were walking, talking, collecting, teaching, resting, repairing, noticing, and deciding. Danger was real, but if danger filled every hour, humans would not have had time to become human. Your body did not evolve only for panic. It evolved for rhythm. Morning might begin slowly. People wake as light spreads. Someone checks the fire. Someone listens. Children stir. The air is cool, so movement makes sense. A group leaves camp before the day gets too hot. They carry tools, containers, and knowledge that is not written anywhere except in memory. By midday, heat presses down. The smart body slows. Modern culture sometimes treats rest like weakness, but rest was a technology. Rest saved water. Rest saved calories. Rest prevented stupid decisions. If the sun was brutal, sitting in shade was not laziness. It was intelligence. Then the day opened again. People returned with food or news. Roots were roasted. Meat was shared if a hunt succeeded. Plant foods were processed. Children moved between adults. Someone told a joke. Someone complained. Someone flirted. Someone watched the edge of camp because attention never fully turned off. Sharing was not just kindness. It was insurance. If you found food today, someone else might find food tomorrow. If you were sick next week, the person you fed yesterday might keep you alive. Anthropologists call this reciprocity, which simply means giving and receiving over time. It was not a perfect moral paradise. People argued. People got jealous. People cheated. People were human. But a small group could not survive if every person lived like a sealed container. You needed others. This is where Marshall Sahlins enters the story. In 1966, Sahlins gave the famous lecture that later became the original Affluent Society. Affluent means wealthy, but he was not saying foragers had luxury cars or endless food. He argued that some hunter-gatherers could be called affluent in a different way because their needs were limited, their tools were few, and their wants did not grow endlessly beyond what life could provide. That idea became controversial. It could romanticize hardship. It could make real hunger and danger sound softer than they were. But the basic challenge stayed alive. What if wealth is not only having more? What if wealth can also mean needing less? Anthropologist James Suzman returned to this question in his writing on the Jew/hoansi and the history of work. He argued that the modern obsession with productivity is not the natural state of the human species. It grew stronger with farming, storage, property, wages, and the fear that there will never be enough. That is the twist. The agricultural revolution did not simply free humans from work. In many places, it created more of it. Fields had to be cleared. Seeds had to be planted. Crops had to be guarded. Grain had to be stored. Animals had to be penned. Surplus had to be counted, defended, taxed, stolen, or fought over. Bioarchaeologist Clark Spencer Larson has written about how the shift to farming often brought harder labor, narrower diets, more infectious disease, and new stresses visible in bones and teeth. Bioarchaeology means studying human remains to understand how people lived. Bones can remember what pride forgets. So the ancient day before farming was not automatically worse than the peasant day after farming. It was different. Risk was spread across wild foods instead of concentrated in a field. Time was shaped by weather instead of bells. Authority was often limited because mobile people could walk away from a bully more easily than farmers tied to land. This does not mean the past was better. It means the story of progress is not a straight line from misery to comfort. So imagine one ordinary day. You wake in a camp where everyone knows your face, your habits, your strengths, and your annoying flaws. You eat a little leftover food. You join a group heading out across dry ground. The sky is pale. The air still has morning in it. An older woman points at a plant and says it is not ready. A child asks why. The answer is not a lecture. The answer is a hand, a smell, a memory, a warning about the last person who got sick. Later, someone finds honey. Suddenly the day changes. People climb, smoke out bees, laugh, shout, get stung, and act like the whole universe has briefly become sweet. There is no productivity chart for this. There is just risk, skill, hunger, joy, and sticky fingers. By afternoon, you are tired. Not broken. Tired. There is a difference. Your muscles have moved through a landscape they understand. Your feet hurt, but your attention has not been shattered by 1,000 invisible demands. Nobody has asked you to prove your worth through an online status light. Back at camp, the day becomes social. Polly Wiessner studied firelight conversations among the Jew/hoansi and found that evening talk often shifted away from daytime economics and into stories, jokes, social bonding, and imagination. In plain terms, the fire changed the mood. Daylight was for practical talk. Night was for meaning. That may be one of the most human parts of the day. When darkness came, your ancestors did not simply shut down. They watched flames. They listened to voices. They learned who was brave, who was foolish, who was generous, who could be trusted, who had crossed a line, and what the dead might still mean to the